Hello, Mao, and welcome to the channel.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Really appreciate you jumping on the channel, to be fair, because I know you've got a lot of busy schedules.
Well, it's important and I think it's good to share some insights, and so I'm always open to that.
True. So the first question I got for you today is, can you, tell the viewers how you started as mastering engineer?
Um I like a lot of people in the audio industry, I was a musician or I worked with musicians and I had a background in broadcasting and I was a DJ and clubs and I had some radio shows and kind of a lot of surrounding stuff that all was probably what brought me into mastering because I was the listener, the person who puts it on the radio or puts it on in the club, or I was a music journalist as well, and I had bands of mine and I would do some shows and I did different things, but it all helped me get a grasp of what I was basically aiming to, and that was mastering. So um, I would say I funneled my way from different aspects of audio to
Yeah,
find where I felt my forte, my specialization can be, and that's where I aimed and worked very hard to gain experience and knowledge in that field.
definitely. I know you've worked so hard. So my next question is, what is your take on analog versus digital when it comes to mixing or mastering?
They're both amazing and they both have their pros and cons. And the best way to approach it is finding what you can get best from each one
Right.
and combine, or just aim for one of them that you like the most and figure out, how you can connect it. I mean, at the end of the day, we're using digital media and digital capturing and digital playback, but using analog can be amazing. If you got the gear that you like and you work with it well, you know, to get to the points where you want to, it will reflect what you want to achieve with it. Same with digital. Both things can do great and both things can have their, drawbacks. But
Right.
I think today's digital is so amazing that you can get so much possibilities with it to every direction you want to go.
Right.
Analog is still great, but most people will have digital because it's more consumed and it's more um, available in computers. But they're amazing both, so I can't say anything bad about anyone without saying anything good about anyone. It's all combined together. You can't just say one thing. There's both sides to the coin.
Yeah, that's very true. And obviously, you got a hardware oven and you've now made a plugin for it. Can you talk to us a bit more about your plugin, the oven?
Well, the oven is a hardware that I've been using for a lot of years. It's a custom unit that was developed by Chris from Handy Amps and me. So we both collaborated on this for a long time till we actually had the hardware. And then when we had the hardware ready, of course, I've been using it for a lot of years
Yeah,
and been testing it around town, and other people have tried it. And later on, we offered it to Brainworks to do a modeling of it. And as you know, it's developed with in conjunction with Brainworks and released with them and Plugin Alliance. It's a great tool. There is a difference between the hardware and the plugin.
right.
Of course, there is going to be a difference, but we are very happy with what came out from the plugin, and I think it's a very useful tool for production, recording, mixing, and mastering.
Right, right. That's very
It
good.
can bring a lot to the table, from subtle coloration to aggressive to mojo to depth and size and impact and saturation, whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So, obviously, like you just talked about hardware versus software. If you were to choose one hardware for your mix, for your mastering, obviously you're a mastering engineer, which one would you gravitate to? Or should I say, which one would you use most?
The speakers. No, it's a good question. Hardware changes. I have an oven, I have a stove, I have a cooker, I have so much gear, but each one is so different than the other.
Right.
So I wouldn't say I would choose one. That's where in the box is easier, because in the box you can have a bunch of plugins that don't take space, where hardware, each unit takes space, and um, electricity, space, cabling, converters. It's a different ecosystem when you're working out of the box,
Right.
both analog and digital out of the box compared to in the box plugins. So there's no one piece of gear that I would take, because whatever I would take, it won't be enough to cover everything else.
Right. Right.
I would take myself.
Yeah, obviously your ears is the most important aspect. So
And the brain too.
true, true,
Right? Because just the ears won't hear it alone.
true, very true. So like when you're mastering, what limiter do you usually, use? Like your most used limiter?
Well, I have different limiters because each one responds differently. So I can't say one, but I can say quite a few if you want. There's the Waves L2, there's the Fab Filter Pro L2, there's a IK Multimedia Stealth limiter, there's a of course Ozone, there's PSP Xenon, there's BX True Peak, there's
Obviously the list goes.
I'm trying. There's a huge list. Yeah. But the thing is that each one is different. They're all good. You can get great results with each one, but each one has something different to it,
Right.
and will react different to the music or to the plugins in conjunction to it.
Right. Right.
So, but you can definitely use one limiter and learn it and use it most of the time, and just figure out how to apply it to what you're working with, if it needs stuff before. But I recommend having a few of them, and
Yeah.
just so you're not limited, limited, pun intended, with the limiter.
That's true. And obviously the good thing is ones like Ozone, which you mentioned, and Pro L2, they have different algorithms.
Yes.
Even though it's one
Right.
limiter, but you can choose different ones inside the same limiter, which is also
Yes.
handy.
Yes. A lot of limiters today have different circuits. Like even the older limiters, like the Massey limiter or the McDSP, the M4000L1. I think it's called M4. Like there's different algorithms inside. So definitely today's limiters are different than the older limiters. Sonarworks has a great limiter too.
That's true.
Yeah, there's a bunch of really good stuff out there.
That's true. So my next question is, if you are asked to master an album with just plugins, what plugins would you choose, and obviously why? Why would you choose those?
Well, it's a tough question for me because most of my work is hardware, even though I do hybrid hardware and add software,
Yeah.
but most of my work is done hardware. But if I had to choose plugins, I would categorize them first to different types, and then with that, like for example, I'll probably need plugins for coloration. Then in that case, I'll probably use the oven plugin, which
Yeah.
I, of course, am part of this, but I also know how to use it, and I like it. So for coloration, I would use that. And then EQ, there's a lot of really good EQs out there. There's an EQ by it's a Soundtech EQ,
Right.
and it's from Make Believe Studios and Metric Halo, and it's a really, really good EQ. It's based on the original 432, the Soundtech, and it's really good. I'm very impressed with it.
Right.
Then there's other plugins that you can work with that are really cool for EQ. Most of the linear phase EQs are quite good, either from FabFilter or Waves. Another thing, limiters, just like I mentioned, there's a bunch of limiters you can work with. I think the best scenario for me is listening to the music, figuring out if it needs coloration, how much coloration, and if it needs more surgical work, then you can bring in dynamic EQs or multi-bands or, you know, de-essers or stuff like that. But not always you need that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's amazing plugins that can do a lot of inside work, you know, like different, not just multi-bands, but you have like chains of plugins that have different sections. Like some have a limiter and some saturation in it, or clippers inside it as well.
Right.
So, you know, I can't say one thing because there's a bunch of plugins I worked on, you know, writing presets to, and they were great to work with.
Right.
But in time, there's more and more coming in, and
Yeah.
you know, if someone asks me in general what would I use, I would say, you know, categorize what you need, and then, you know, like for example, limiters. Okay, so I have a few limiters. If you need clippers, you can put them in the category of limiters as well, because they're in the end of the chain a lot of times.
Yeah.
They could be beginning too, but sometimes you'll just need the clipper in the end. But I would put them as limiters and clippers in one, and grab a few. And then EQs, I would put a few linear phase and a few minimum phase, and maybe an emulation EQ, like you know, like the Matrix Halo, Make Believe Studios, the Soundtech, or Brainworks SPL PQ. I forgot the model that has a EQ.
Right.
Or they also have the 8200, AMIC 8200, which is like a GML 8200 style. That's a very good EQ as well. So categorize it by those type of EQs as well. Or if you want a Puigtec style, put a Puigtec style. And then find a good de-esser, you know, like a Weiss, soft tube and Weiss, or a Fab Filter, or a Sonarworks, or you know, there's quite a few really good de-essers there. And then I would categorize also, you know, in the de-esser functions, maybe a dynamic EQ or a multi-band if needed, of course. You know, and if you need some compression, what type of compression? If you need a Varimute type or a FET type, and like I said, there's so many. They're really good. A lot of them.
And then
So because most of my work is done externally on hardware, I combine the different pieces of gear, and then if I need later on more plugins, then it might be some EQ, maybe some limiting, but most of the work I already get the energy I need from the gear.
Yeah, right, that makes sense. So if someone is starting out, say someone wants to obviously emulate your footsteps to be top mastering engineer as you are, so what advice would you give the person?
Now, first of all, thank you for the kind words about my work. It's always a learning. It's always a development. It's always something we strive for.
True.
And I always like to continue and do more and learn more and experience more. So putting that aside right now, the thing I recommend for people who are starting out is figure out, first of all, what they really want to do.
Right.
Because it's a long road and it will require a lot of investment in time, training, dealing with customers, learning how to bring in the work, coming into this with the, you know, expectations. And then if you're not meeting your expectations, it's going to be hard. So you have to look at it. It's the long game. It's a long marathon.
Right.
And you really need to think if this is what you want. And if you think this is what you want and you're aiming towards it, go in, work hard, train a lot, do as much as you can to experience, learn from people, learn on your own. Yeah, actually, you can probably learn on your own a lot. Don't always have to learn from people. You can just train by yourself a lot. And you know, learning from people is one thing, but really what you're going to do with it is your thing. Because at the end of the day, your experience is based on what you're going to do with your clients, and you can learn from other people's experiences as well. But you need to build your own clientele, sound, approach, style, whatever you want to call it. You need to become you and not a copy of someone else. Okay, so aim for that. Spend the time, spend the money. If something costs money and you need to get it to move to the next level, invest in it. Of course, you can be calculated about how much you're putting out towards how much you're making from it. But in the long game, everything is about investment.
Yeah.
Either time, money, the commitment that you put to this, and it's possible. You can actually make a living out of it. You can actually do this. It's just a matter of if this is what you really want, and if you're willing to sacrifice the time and the learning curve.
Right.
And there's a huge community now, like huge of producers, mixers, mastering engineers, and you can meet them online and in trade shows.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's a lonely world in one way because we are in our own place.
Yeah.
But it's not a lonely world because there are others like us, and there are out there, and we either meet them at shows, trade shows, events, parties, whatever you want to call it, mixers, whatever it's called, or online in forums.
True.
So just go for it. It can be frustrating at times, but it's a roller coaster ride, and it can be fun too.
Yeah, that's good. So one other question that I want to throw in is, like some mastering engineers will say this is how they want the mix to be delivered to them. Do you have any specific ways? Because I know some will say don't put a limiter, things like that, or have it at -3 dB, full scale. So
my approach, what you say?
Do you have any specific on it delivered?
I think the best thing is really to communicate with the mastering engineer. Like when there's a project coming in, I usually like to have a phone conversation with the producer mixer just so I know what they're going to send me, and kind of get the labeling right on the file, so that way I know what I'm getting, and just to make sure we're on the same page, because it's easy to accidentally get the wrong file or accidentally misunderstand something. And every mastering engineer has his way of working.
True.
And throughout time, you learn more and more ways to make it better for the user, and find out how to make it more efficient for you in terms of file management, communications, and all that. So I think the best thing is really to reach out and communicate with the people involved, just so you'll be on the same page.
So one other question I've actually thought of throwing in is, have you had to decline a mix, maybe because the quality of the mix is not up to the standard or something like that?
Oh yeah. But in those cases, when I decline, it's not declining I don't want to work with it. It's I hear some problems in the mix, and I would suggest making some fixes if possible. If they can, and they fix it, and I get a better mix, great, I'll work with it. If they can't, and it is what it is, then I'll work with it as is, and I'll do what I can with what I got. But if there's problems, it's usually better to fix them, if possible, in the mix, because then your mastering work will be better to begin with.
That's true. So thank you so much for obviously hanging out with me today. It's really a pleasure.
You're welcome. My pleasure as well. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and good luck for everybody.
You too. I'll hopefully maybe have you back on the channel some other time.
I'll be happy to. And I wish everybody the best, and let's make some great music and great sounds, and good luck with all the production, recording, engineering, mixing, and mastering, and let's keep the music playing and making it happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.